You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we are back once again with our second week covering Ghosts of Paris by Tara Moss with our good friend Dom here, a local at 2SER. We are talking chapters 13 to 24 today. Dom is in the hot seat, and I wanted to get off with perhaps my favorite point about this part of the novel, but also my biggest sticking point about this part of the novel.
What's that?
That is that at the same time, I love how practical this book is, but I also hate how practical this book is. For example, we ended off at the last stretch of chapters with Shyla back in Sydney, the Indigenous woman that Billie has gotten to basically cover and look after her office while she's gone, receiving a letter with a shocking revelation about Richard Montgomery.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. And I was looking forward to the big convoluted plan of how Shyla got that information to Billie, and it was going to be a big plan where she has to fly to the other side of the world. But of course, Indigenous women trying to leave the country in the 1940s, that's going to be a bit of strife, unfortunately.
Unless they're fighting for our country and then coming back and not being recognized for fighting for our country.
Oh my goodness.
I was looking forward to, having some complications there, but she just mails it and it arrives just in time for them to need it. And I love just how blunt that is, that it's like, well, of course she'd mail it. It's the best way to get it to them in the 1940s. But I kind of longed for the chaos that would have come out of that situation.
I thought you were going to complain about the fact that when you split the book in three, because there are 36 chapters and we go 12 and then 24, that, we end on another awesome cliffhanger that involves Shyla again. I thought you were going to complain about that, because you love it, and yet you also go, how did that work out?
Well, it's kind of a fun series of chapters because, as you say, we don't really get a lot of drama with Shyla the first time we kind of touch bases with her, or even the second time. There is we come back and forth to these two, between Australia and Europe a couple of times, and you could almost replace the Shyla scenes with Billie receives a letter from Shyla telling her about what's going on, except for the fact that she stabs a man. And I don't think you could replace that with anything, frankly.
I think the other thing that you brought up there that I found really engaging in this stretch was the discussion with Harold and Basil, was it? About the punishment for war crimes in the Second World War. Oh my goodness. That entire scene was so tangibly uncomfortable, but I also love kind of the way that it's so authentic to the real situation, because one thing we had journalist Paul Daly on a while ago to speak about the different ways that Australia and Japan view their war history when we were covering some Japanese novels. And one thing that I remember from that conversation is the way that so many countries are embarrassed by their war history and don't speak about it. We were in Australia House, which is everything's in absolute turmoil, and yet the people working inside, and the people who've been working inside for the longest.
And they're all, let's make up and be friendly.
Yeah.
Let's not be beastly to the Germans, as Noel Coward once sang.
Yeah, I mean, I love Billie in this series of scenes because clearly she's trying to do the sort of, there's a bit of the femme fatale in there. She's following this guy around who's smitten with her, trying to play the scene and get all the information she needs and get some contacts and allies while she's in London. But she gets so caught up justifiably in maybe we shouldn't let the Nazis go, that her facade is completely destroyed, because obviously a lot of the locales that we move through in this novel are bombed out and cracked. And we have all these characters who are dealing with the trauma of the war. And yeah, that contrast, I guess, between the characters who can't leave the past behind because they're caught up in it, and the characters who say, well, I have enough distance to the concentration camps. I think we can get away with, making friends with all the Nazis. I think that's a really powerful juxtaposition and a good place to put our main characters and to be vulnerable in as well. I think it's really cool.
I love your observation. And even further than that, remember that the problem with France were there were a lot of collaborators. And
Yes.
they're the ones that don't want to forget now. We're going to get those bastards. We're going to pursue them till we get them all. They're all declared guilty and, they're going to be put to death if we ever catch them, guilty in absentia. Whereas the Australians who weren't collaborators are like, oh, well, forgive and forget, move on, life goes on.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was really interesting in their herds that you pointed out was the kind of femme fatale nature of Billie's character, because on the one hand, she absolutely fits the archetype. We get to see so much of her outfits, so much of her passion. I love the scene when the is it the concierge at the Ritz is like, pants are illegal. And she's like, I'm sorry, what?
But it turns out she only has the one pair,
Exactly.
so it's not a problem, really.
Yeah. But the scene that was really interesting to me in that lens was when they go to the Caversham Smith's house, and she's taken the keys from Sam for this rental car that they have, driving it around the countryside, having a grand old time, very much in the kind of spirit of like Phryne Fisher, not giving a crap about what anyone thinks of you, upholding the standards of your time. But when she arrives at the Caversham Smiths, she swaps seats with Sam to not startle them as they go up the driveway, which doesn't end up paying off as well, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, look, that's very good observation on your part. I like the fact that it means she's even more of a femme fatale, knowing when to be strong and when to, to lay back a bit. I mean, she's playing the game better now because she's more aware of letting her emotions go and not the ramifications of not being in control.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love a protagonist who can be vulnerable. And I think that, like, we're throwing around the term femme fatale, and it absolutely fits. But seeing the moments where she does break character, where she says the wrong thing, makes mistakes even, shock horror, that's something we can allow our protagonists to do. Those are my favorite parts of this novel. They're my favorite parts of most of these sorts of novels. And I definitely think that, especially as we see her interactions with Vera, and the way that she's almost like being strong for Vera because she empathizes with her, like I think are much more clear now that we understand the ways in which she puts on a facade.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's so great about that is that she has that bit of character development right before she finds out that one of her friends that we met earlier in a flashback may have seen Jack Rake, her war widow, previous book in the series husband, who was last seen in Poland before this, and her inner conflict about that character development that she's just had, but also feeling the tightness in her chest every time she goes to discuss, you might have seen Jack somewhere.
My favorite image in that, though, is when Simone describes him as wearing a necktie. Wearing a necktie?
Yes,
Jack would never wear a necktie unless he was trying to hide the bullet wound in his neck.
That's ridiculous. I love it.
I do also love Billie's constant need to like try and explain away the things that she feels uncomfortable about, because it's like part of her role as the inquiry agent to be able to answer people's questions. So she'll like hastily make an assumption of her own is really great, because it like serves twofold, showing her discomfort, but also Tara being able to like lure us as an audience, a piece of bait thrown out into the pond.
Can I just say that towards the end of the last episode, I was kind of wondering if it was possible for Jack and Richard to be the same person, to either be Rack Rake or Richard Montgomery, not realising, of course, that Tara had seen a photo of Richard and would have known. I've done it again! Billie would have seen a photo of Richard and realised whether or not he was Jake. So that was a bit foolish on my part.
Several photos, I believe, but that's okay. I wasn't about to ruin a good theory.
Or even a bad one at that. My other stupid theory, because I have to come up with a new theory.
You do.
And I know this one's already wrong, but for a split second I thought, maybe no one's ever seen Richard and his wife in the same room at once. And he hasn't died. He's just come out and said, actually, I was a woman all along and I'm now pregnant.
I suppose, though, we should probably wrap this part of the discussion here and transition on over to the mystery, and also take a moment to talk further about the queers, because that's definitely where I want to angle this mystery.
Did you say the queers?
That sounds fantastic.
The queers.
The queers.
The queers.
Frightening prospect, I'm sure. Anyhow, all that and more in just a bit. You're listening to Death of the Reader, your murder mystery world tour here on 2SER 107.3. Stick around. Flex here with you. I'm joined on the line at a horrifying hour by Nicolas Pleskof, director of Murder Party. It is a French murder mystery film that you might have caught at the French Film Festival earlier this year, but its broader release is the 28th of July. Nicolas, it is a treat to have you on. Welcome to Death of the Reader.
Thanks for having me.
So, one thing we love about murder mysteries here on Death of the Reader is the very game-like back and forth between the reader, the author, and you put that very literally with the Deguerre family's game empire. How important was it for you that viewers could play along with the puzzle that you'd created?
What I've always loved about murder mysteries in books and in cinema is precisely the fact that it's the genre the most playful and the most gamish you can do in cinema. Cluedo, the Clue games is has always been adapted from Agatha Christie, and today you got I think it's this genre has got the specificity of not, it doesn't take itself seriously.
Yeah.
When you go to see a whodunit on cinema or to read a whodunit, you're looking for you're trying to find a murderer, and you're talking about a very I would say serious topics. But the genre since the beginning of times have always been about including the reader or the viewer to a story when he can look himself about for the murderer, when he can figure himself what could be the motive for killing. As someone who loves to be to be included in the process when I go to cinema, I love the fact that someone is playing with me. I am playing with the film. And when I wrote Murder Party, something I wanted was to make the status of the viewer evolve throughout the film. First, it's you the murderer plays with. And in the second part, but I cannot say more because I would spoil, but in the second part of the movie, in a way, you are getting the player with the characters in the film.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really fascinating because César Deguerre, the game designer, who is your lead victim, and because he is that game designer character, it immediately throws doubt on the entire premise of what's going on, which isn't something that a lot of crime stories kind of have the confidence to do. And I think it's so impressive the way that you've lent into how implausibility contributes to the fun of the whodunit.
Thanks a lot. I remember when I wrote the script, very soon in the process, I knew that I wanted him to be a board game empire, because it goes quite naturally with the journey of my main character. I didn't want my main character to be a detective. I wanted him to be someone who could learn something during his journey, someone who could evolve during his journey, because most of the time the detectives, are some really I would say blocked characters, some characters that do not obviously evolve and that do not have obviously a way between the beginning and the end. And I knew that I wanted to talk about childhood. I knew that the journey I wanted to give to my character was one of someone who finds back his childhood within, and through this adventure, because it happens in the world of games and of children board games, it's a way for my character to make his journey in himself. So it was so the world of the game became quite naturally when I knew I wanted to talk about childhood.
Well, yeah, I think that's something really fun because, Hercule is the name of the child here. And of course, being named after one of the world's greatest detectives really leans into the idea that there is something youthful about the detective character and that search that you have the opportunity to go on through murder mystery. The other thing that I heard you say in an interview, which absolutely fascinated me, partially because it took me forever to translate it from French, but was that you described the film as Cluedo within Clue and hyperpop as a genre. Could you talk a little bit about that kind of aesthetic leading? Because it's so fascinating to me using something as insane as hyperpop and so modern for something as classic as the murder mystery.
I think when you go to see a murder mystery, the one thing you want, without even telling it, is to be surprised. It's a genre which is so popular. It's a genre which have been so much seen that every people who go to see this that kind of film is waiting for his cliches to be broken.
Yeah.
He wants to see cliches, but he wants to be surprised. And first, I wanted to surprise people with something that's not so, I would say, that you don't see every day on screen. And then for me, this aesthetic, I made it for two reasons. The first, obviously, is that I love old Hollywood cinema, all, the 50s, 60s aesthetic, and with the Technicolor movies. And what I love about it is that it's the most playful aesthetic. When I wrote the script, I wanted people to enter on a board game, like a live board game. So I tried to design the castle and the lights, and even tell people how to play in a very childish and playful way. And then it seemed totally, coherent with what I was telling. And then I knew I wanted to this world to be as crazy, because when you read the script, what happened in the film is totally crazy. It couldn't happen in the real world. It's totally fucked up. It goes all over the top. And and I told myself, if I film that kind of strange story in a very familiar and naturalistic aesthetic, you wouldn't believe it. If you enter this castle, and the actors play very naturally, the lights are very natural, the costumes are very natural, the way of filming is very natural, you just won't believe it. You just tell yourself, well, how can I believe that a murderer is going to trap some people and make them play? I just don't accept it. But if you enter this manor, and it looks like a dollhouse with pink lights, actors playing very theatrically.
The pink lights in the window was just so good, because you have this like sort of day for night filming where you did it as like a slightly absurd blue, and that was like it was noticeable, but it wasn't too much. But the pink windows stick out like the sorest thumb in the best way.
Oh, thanks. What is funny is that my DOP had a really clever system. We just with an iPad with our finger could choose a color, and it could have been any color: green, blue, black, what I wanted. And we just spent 10 minutes trying every color. And when I saw this pink, I looked at him and I told him, that's it. That is the most uncommon and absurd color. And for me, it was a statement. When you come to this manor with this light, with this pink color behind every window, you just tell yourself, okay, I'm getting in a crazy world. Everything can happen, because we were in a world where outside the window, the world is just plain pink. So it means in a way that we're coming in the cartoon world, and that anything can happen.
I think that the pink is also such a good example of what you described in another interview as playful and suffocating, which is such like a great combination of ideas where it makes so little sense that your brain kind of gets caught up on it, that some characters in the scene are like able to get away with things that you're a little bit distracted by, which is perfect for the murder mystery as well. Like drawing the attention away from things going on is like right up there with how you make the game engaging.
Yes, and exactly when I wanted to make it both suffocating and childish, because all the film, it's child games, but in a very perverse way, very dangerous way. So there's always this contrast and this mix of ideas all throughout the film between, it's the two faces of a child. A child on one hand is very sweet and in a magic world, and on the other hand, a child is very cruel. Child is very violent, and all the movie is about playing with this contrast, and also yes, I wanted to be the most claustrophobic you can be, and but in a bittersweet way. It was it is a pink of it could be a candy store, but at the same way you are trapped in the candy store. So they wanted always to have those two sides.
Nicholas, I will let you go. A massive congratulations on the Australian release in this
Thanks
film
you,
and
thank you a lot.
the end of the run. I can heartily recommend it if you're into your murder mysteries, which if you're listening to Death of the Reader, I don't know what else you'd be into. And
yeah, would be logic.
stick around with us for a little bit. More to come. You're on Death of the Reader. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds and Dom here for your Murder Mystery World Tour discussing Tara Moss's The Ghost of Paris, chapters 13 to 24. This is the middle section of the book, which means, Dom, you are posed with the challenge of trying to come up with an alternate, perhaps more accurate theory on what is about to come our way at the end of this novel. Herds?
Flex?
I think the thing that we should talk about first here is the gaze, because it's definitely it's definitely a big part of the mystery, because so many of our suspects, as it's turned out in this section, have fallen under the same umbrella as Mr. Charles in the previous episode. And I was
pretty umbrella.
Yes, I was really fascinated by like how many people that ended up being. You know, the entire bit that the letter that Shyla got at the end of last chapter was a warning about Richard being a blackmailer, and it turns out he was blackmailing other gay men to keep his secret of being a gay man secret, was like a fascinating hook.
The whole queer theme of this story, like, it's used to spotlight gays like as a community, which I think is really cool, because we're using the linchpin of like blackmail, one character blackmailing a series of other characters to show that there is a community in Sydney of queer people, and also that in Paris, Simone takes Billy to a lesbian bar, basically, and throughout this entire novel, even if you didn't know you were getting into it, you know, when you first started, we're being shown this, like, it's a little bit patchwork, but we're being shown this community of queer people across Europe, across Australia, and also showing how normalized this life is for these people in the 1940s.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was really interesting is the way that everyone is surprised that Richard is gay. Like, oh, he was so effortlessly flirtatious with the opposite sex. How could he possibly have been gay? But it's like, there's definitely a skew of people who find it so much easier to flirt with people they aren't interested in.
Yeah, well, like there are two aspects to this, right? One is he's playing into the theme of the facade, which you've already talked about at length in regards to Billy, and the other is that Sam, who is a character that, frankly, I don't think we talk about enough. He is not necessarily flirtatious, but he is like constantly being looked at and hit on because of his own attractiveness. And I think that it's just another way of being like, even if a character is not, you know, this character is not, you know, all off the walls, hitting on everybody around. If you're an attractive character in this novel, you're going to be noticed, I suppose.
I don't want to minimize or call into question any of the way we look back on the Holocaust. People of Jewish origins were picked on, but we also know that homosexuals and other, in inverted commas, undesirables to the Third Reich were also picked on, minimalizes what went on. I still wonder, is the deliberate foregrounding of homosexuality still serving as a double for Jewishness? Or, I mean, I don't know yet. I don't know how it plays into the story.
It's an interesting challenge, I think, not only for any author featuring the Second World War to like tell your story without minimizing the volume of horror that came out of the Second World War, but there's also something tidy about the fact that, as you suggest there, Dom, that there are so many parallels and this like collective dismantling of undesirables. makes it very easy to tell a story about one that highlights the tragedy that happened to another. So regardless of the intention, I think that the effect is probably the same there.
Oh, absolutely, because we know that from the callous Aussies in Australia House, they sound anti-Semitic as well as not being able to cope with people with different lifestyle choices.
I think, though, Dom, off the back of that, we do need to actually throw some questions at you. We've got a cavalcade of gay men out there blackmailing each other to keep their secrets hidden. We have the potential return of Jack Rake to the fold, having been spotted by Simone. There are so many different things going on in this story, and not to mention,
We've
of course,
stabbed an Italian man.
We have stabbed an Italian man. What?
I'm just saying.
We were chased down by a car. We had someone break and enter Billy's
yeah.
office. You've got so many things to tackle,
chase.
Dom. What's what?
Well, the thing that you haven't raised that I thought was also interesting about the cliffhanger is they may have found Jack Rake's body. We haven't worked out that it wasn't his body yet that they've found in the morgue.
Let me start with an easy one. Do you think that Jack Rake is alive or dead?
I reckon
Dom,
he's alive.
You think he's alive or dead? You think he's alive?
If he's dead,
then
does Sam turn out to be gay, or does Sam and Billy hit it off? Or
I love where your head's at. This is great. Is Sam a gay? I need to know. This is very important to me personally.
Need to know. I don't need to know personally. Is it important to the story? He doesn't turn down... Well, I don't know if he turns down any offers from the women that flirt with him.
This is the thing that's amazing about Sam's characterization, right? Is that he's never flirtatious, but the omniscient narrator part of Billy's voice in the story always observes him as though the void is flirting for him as he's doing anything.
He's the poor hapless victim of the flirtatious void. It's not his fault he's good looking.
The poor hapless victim of the flirtatious void is a novel I want. Is Jack Rake alive?
See, here's the thing. I want him to be alive, but then I also want him to be dead. Schrodinger's Jack Rake. If I look in the box,
it's not an answer,
dead.
Dom. You can't say he's in a box.
So you're saying the reason he disappeared in 1944 is because he went to New York to work on the Manhattan Project?
Indeed.
All right, sounds good. That's locked in.
I think Jack's dead.
All right, Jack's
dead.
Next
Jack's dead,
thing
baby.
is,
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
all right, and finally, the fate of Richard Montgomery. Where is this man who supposedly cannot hide hiding, and why?
Richard was in the car, not Jane. Richard was in the car. He wants to stay hid. Why does he want to stay hid? Oh, he's a Nazi sympathiser.
The car in London?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
he hasn't been seen in 2 years. You think he's just been standing in the same spot in Paris for the past 2 years, Herd?
You know what? That's fair. I just want to make sure I completely understand the theory as it's laid out by Lieutenant General Dom.
No one understands the theory, let alone me.
And the final thing that we have to ask you from Tara herself is all of this in play, all of these narratives about refugees going missing, mysterious gay blackmailers. How would you end this novel? I should say, I thought this was a rather cruel question, but Tara did ask it.
Jack can't be dead.
Jack can't be dead.
Jack can't be dead.
Jack can't be dead. You're changing your answer.
Jack can't be dead because the guy in the morgue loves Australians. And he would have known. If he was embalming an Aussie, he would have known. I don't know how. There's a certain je ne sais quoi about embalming Aussies. He would have known.
So hold on. But if the guy in the morgue loves Aussies and loves working with them, maybe that is Jack in the morgue, but he's faked his death because he's gotten involved in something bigger.
So it's not Jack in the morgue.
But it is Jack in the morgue, but it's not dead Jack in the morgue.
It's fake Jack.
It is.
Jack 2
It is
Renegade.
the other half of Schrodinger's Jack.
Right.
No.
Did Jack do in Richard to fake his own death? Is Richard the Jack double currently lying in the morgue?
Well, we've seen pictures of him. You know he's not the same person.
No, he doesn't need to be the same person. They're two different people. If they were the same
Go on,
person,
Dom.
he couldn't fake his own death using himself as his body double. How does that work? That is Schrodinger's Jack.
Well, you could just lie
You know
on the
what?
slab until
I
the
agree.
people that need to have seen you and then leave.
No. No.
Finally,
She jumped,
finally a clear answer
jumped
from
his
Dom.
bones on the slab. There's no way that he's actually dead or pretending to be dead while Billy is looking at him going, oh my God, that's the corpse of my husband who I haven't seen in 2 years.
We've done it, everyone. We've
Man.
got a clear answer from Dom after all this
So wait.
time.
Like, I don't know that we have.
Because if it dies and then he dies and then, he told me the middle 2 letters of life are if.
Next week on the show, all the way to the end of the book. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us on your Murder Mystery World Tour here on 2SER 107.3. We're out of here.